Yes. That little series of text message suggests that maybe we've lost perspective just a little bit. And I know it is so difficult to do in times like these, when it just seems like I said before, there's this series of unprecedented events, and it makes it feel as if the world's financial architecture is just sort of crashing down around you. The economy looks terrible. And talk to me about sentiment. If I just walk out into the hotel and just start chatting with people and ask them how they feel about the economy, how do they feel about the economy? Are they positive or negative? Unequivocally negative, and they have been for 12 long months. But the funny thing is, in order to really understand this environment and that negativity, I think it's very helpful to understand what's honestly going on, because I think some of that negativity is not really based in reality. Some of that is sort of media perception. So what I'd like to do today is, first of all, address really that cartoon that Charlie put up on the board earlier. Remember that American consumer, and it's really not a recession because there haven't been technically two quarters of negative GDP growth. I want to draw the distinction for you between a recession and a slowdown, because I do believe what we're experiencing today is a slowdown. That's why it feels so bad. In order to understand whether or not it's a slowdown, we have to get our benchmarks correct. So the first place that we're going to start is with just the plain old numbers. What's actually going on in the U.S. economy today? That's where we're going to start. But I want to actually give you a little economic history lesson, because I do not believe that you can understand the current economic environment unless you go back and sort of try to figure out, how did we get here? I honestly believe that so much of the uncertainty and the fear that people have around the U.S. economy today, it's rooted in the fact that they just plain old don't understand it, and they do not understand, how did we get here? How did we get to this point? So that's what we're going to do today, and I'll save plenty of time for question and answer at the end. So if you do have a question, jot it down on your paper, and we'll take Q&A when I wrap up my remarks. But let's just start, first of all, with the benchmarks. What does the economy actually look like? Because if I just went out and, like I said, took a survey in the hotel lobby and asked people, what's the unemployment rate in America today? What kind of numbers do you think I would get? What do you think? What would be the single most common response if I asked people, what's the unemployment today? What percentage of the workforce is unemployed? 6.7. Somebody actually knows the numbers, okay? Somebody knows the numbers. The unemployment today is indeed 6%, 6.1%. But the question is that a high rate or a low rate? We're going to talk about that with benchmarks. Now, essentially, every economy, no matter what that economy is, has three important, what I'll call vital statistics. There are three vital statistics around the economy. So if you think about it, when you go to the doctor, they take your blood pressure, they take your temperature, unfortunately, they take your weight as well. They take your vital statistics. So every person has vital statistics. Every economy has vital statistics as well. The three vital statistics for the economy are GDP growth, sort of how much is production growing. So GDP captures production, how much is being made by the U.S. economy. The unemployment rate deals with jobs. What percentage of the labor force is unemployed? And then there's a third vital statistic that doesn't get nearly as much attention as it probably ought to, and that is the inflation rate. At what rate are prices rising or falling in an economy? Those are the three vital statistics. Every economy's benchmarks are a little bit different. Just like every person's vital statistics are going to be a little bit different. Your appropriate temperature, right? Everybody's got the same appropriate temperature, but your appropriate rate might be different whether you're tall or short or old or young. So with GDP growth, what would you expect from the U.S. economy? What's our benchmark? If we're just trying to gauge, is the economy healthy or not healthy? Is it producing or not producing? In the United States, what we would expect is for GDP to grow 3%. A 3% growth rate is a reasonable expectation for growth. That's your benchmark. If growth comes in above 3%, that's a booming economy. If growth comes in at less than 3%, okay, that's a slowdown. So do you see that it sort of changes our idea a little bit about what constitutes a recession? Don't get hung up on that recession definition, that 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. All that has to happen for the consumer to feel bad is for the GDP growth rate to be less than 3%. Anything less than 3%, that's technically a slowdown. So the economy may be growing at 1%, but that's going to feel bad to people because what are they accustomed to? 3. They're accustomed to 3. Now, just to clarify things though, in the last quarter that we have statistics for, GDP grew by 3.3%. Now, she just told me that the benchmark is 3%, and then she told me that the economy grew at 3.3%, which is above that. How can that be when everybody's talking recession? Well, I'm going to save that for the end of my talk. We're going to resolve that paradox at the end of my discussion. How is it that the economy can still be growing 3.3%, even though it'll probably decline in the next quarter, when, let's talk second vital statistic, the unemployment rate is 6.1%. Now, what would be an appropriate benchmark? Is 6% high or low? Well, most economists would expect the unemployment rate to be 5%. So the unemployment rate, which is normally around 5%, that's a normal number. That's a number that won't feel bad. The unemployment rate, normally at 5%, has climbed up to 6.1%, 101 basis points. That's considerable. That's a lot of movement on the unemployment rate. If the unemployment rate's gone up to 6.1%, if you ask me why people feel so bad, that's it. That's the number that's bothering them. They sense that their jobs are in jeopardy. But again, that's a number that has to be looked at a little more deeply. Because if you take teenagers out of the numbers and don't consider unemployment among teenagers, where it's 20%, 20% of teenagers are unemployed. If you strip them out of the numbers, the unemployment rate in the United States falls to 4.4%. 4.4%. 1 in 6 of every unemployed person in the United States is between the ages of 16 and 19. And that makes complete sense because they're dangerous and they don't deserve to have jobs.